Hello and welcome to episode 554. Yes, got to check that, James. 554 of the Daily Sales Message podcast, where every single day I share a piece of simple and actionable advice. It's designed to help you feel more confident and sell more stuff too. Now, if you're new around here, my name is James Newell and I teach people how to sell for a living. And for me, selling comes in two very distinct components. It starts with having a clear sales message. People have got to understand what you're trying to sell to them in a clear and concise way. Sounds flippant, but if you've ever struggled to explain what you do or what you offer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And secondly, you need selling confidence, the ability to be relaxed and comfortable and confident in a selling situation. Now, in today's episode of the podcast, we are talking about complication and the value of it. And this is a funny one for me because usually I talk about the dangers of complication, the dangers of confusing people. Syllables are expensive, explanations are expensive. So why have I changed my tune all of a sudden? You might be thinking. Well, let me explain. Part of the problem, particularly if you have a service-based business, a done-for-you service where I will do it for you, whether it's fitting your toilet or writing your new website, whatever it happens to be, if I'm doing something for you and it's a service, there's a small part of you that's thinking, I could probably do this myself. It'd be cheaper. It'd be free. Arguably, might be quicker too. But why am I paying James all that money to fit my toilet? All right, I'll give it a go. A lot of people decide to DIY, do it yourself, do it themselves, and the trouble is with that, it never really works. So I use something called recomplication as a deterrent, because whilst we want to make what we do sound straightforward and accessible, so for me with clear sales message, we will articulate all of the questions. What do you do and how do you do it? Why should we choose you? And blah, blah, blah. And we'll streamline everything out. I have to make them realize they can't do it for themselves. And it's a lot harder than I'm making it sound. So that's when I would reference things like, well, I've got a 613-point methodology that sits behind everything I do at Clear Sales Message. And there's a couple of core things you need. You're going to need to have like a basic logic chain in your messaging. We need to know the difference between the primary and the secondary messaging. And then, of course, for the different ICPs, the different ideal client profiles, we need to know the avatars, but we also need to know 17 other pieces of information about them for this to work. So whilst I'm explaining to you that creating a clear sales message is a straightforward thing, and it is, and for you it is because you give me the money and I'll make it for you kind of thing, what I have to do is make you realize that there's a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of potential danger and delay, etc. And I call this recomplication. So if you've ever had anybody DIY, so not take you up on your offer and, I'll just do it myself, it'd be cheaper, easier, free, blah, blah, blah. Think about recomplicating your offering. Talk about the difficult things behind the scenes that people don't see. And this isn't to say we're lying or making things up. We're just bringing it to the fore. And one of the best things is numbers. So if you do have a 17-point process and a 600-point methodology and 5 things to consider and 3 things to avoid, being specific with numbers also helps the buyer think, hang on a minute. This is not as easy as it sounds, is it? I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And that will deter them from doing it themselves. So I call that recomplication. So if you have a done-for-you service, think about using that today, particularly if you get a lot of people who just think, I'll do it myself. Don't need James, do it myself. Right, that's it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you for listening or watching all the way to the end. So tomorrow in episode 555, all the fives, we're talking about a priority chain. A priority chain, what it is, where it sits within your sales messaging and why it's important. And ironically, I've just given you a great example there of recomplication because you think, hang on a minute, what's a priority chain? I don't have one, blah, blah, blah. And hopefully that should be enough to spur you on to listen to tomorrow's episode. So I'll catch you tomorrow for episode 555 on the Fast Talking Daily Sales Message podcast.